Hello viewers, good morning and thanks for joining us on the midweek edition of Newspaper Review, coming to you live from the studios of the Advent Cable Network Nigeria here in Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory. I am Phoebe Agimahiu. One story that rocks the headlines is the stolen fund from Abuja's loot. So let's take a look at the stories on the front pages of the newspaper. I'll start with the Vanguard newspaper, which leads with of Boko Haram's victims are Muslims, says President Buhari in article published in U.S. magazine. Adds, slain Pastor Adimi's fate should inspire all Nigerians. Khan replies, no multi-stakeholder survey to back president's assertions. Why Christians are now targets of deadly terror attacks. That's an investigation. See page 5 for the details. Alright, coming down is this picture tagged Nigeria Visa Policy 2020. From left, Permanent Secretary, Interior Ministry, Georgina Ehuria, Comptroller General of Immigration, Minister of Interior, President Muhammadu Buhari, Chairman Senate Committee on Interior, Chairman House Committee on Interior, SGF, that's the Secretary General of the Federation, Chief of Staff, and Minister of Information, as the President officially presents to the public the Nigeria Visa Policy NVP 2020 in State House Abuja yesterday. Beside that leading story on page 9, federal government signs tripartite agreement to repatriate $318 million Abuja loot. Alright, moving on above the masthead on page 19, Customs intercept $8.065 million cash at Lagos Airport. Federal government begins to move to reverse U.S. visa ban. Page 9. On page 8, hate speech bill. Stakeholders, sponsors clash at town hall meeting. You have discourse on page 29. Eat the poor to save Nigeria. My political party manifesto by David Hondeyen. On page 28, which is the last story from the Vanguard newspaper, single buyer model of privatization behind electricity wars. That's coming from the TCN boss. Alright, let's move on. Next is the Blueprint newspaper. And just beside the masthead on page 5, 70% of $22.718 billion loan request for Asia. That's coming from Minister. And on page 34, low oil prices. Analysts see reserves averaging $37 billion in 2020. Alright, on page 6, insecurity. Can right to arouse popular consciousness. That's coming from the federal government. Play 2, NSA back community policing. It begins on the front page and continues on page 6. On page 17, Yola discourse foresees low performance in Northeast. And the leading story is on minimum wage. Kwara, Niger raised concerns. Taraba yet to set up committee. Sani Bello begs. Abdul Razak says not feasible. 16 states complying. 16 implemented. That's coming from NLC. Rejects federal government's plan to borrow 2 trillion naira from pension fund. Page 6. Alright, let's take a look at the big picture. Sitting from left, members, Federal Inland Revenue Service Board, Alhaji Adamu Mohammed, Northeast. Mr. James Ayuba, North Central. Registrar, General Corporate Affairs Commission, Garba Abubakar. Executive Chairman of FIRS and Chairman African Tax Administration Forum, ATAF, Mohamed Nami, and other participants during the opening of the 9th ATAF Country Correspondence Conference and first experts meeting on taxation of the internal sector in Abuja on Tuesday. Alright, the bottom strip stories. Nigeria will repay Abuja loot if stolen again. That's coming from US, page 5. And on page 31, we won't be drawn into court judgments rule. That's coming from INEC. Reps query fine over 65.66 billion naira revenue shortfall. 26. NAPTIP arrests 2 women for buying, selling month-old baby. Wow. Page 13. And lastly, from the Blueprint newspaper on page 28, Senate passes 238.15 billion naira customs budget amid controversy. Senate passes 238.15 billion naira customs budget amid controversy. Leadership newspaper is next, and I'll start with the stories just below the masthead. CBN supports 600 agric projects with 622 billion naira. Alright, the story begins on the front page and continues on page 5. On page 2, Saudi Arabia ambassador to Nigeria dies in Abuja. May his soul rest in perfect peace. The leading story is on page 4. Nigeria, US agree on return of $308 million Abacha loot. And the kickers, fund to be used for second Niger bridge, Lagos-Ibadan, Abuja-Kano roads. Federal government seeks speedy delivery of Super Tucano jets from Abuja. The picture below the leading story is still the picture on the Nigeria Visa Policy 2020 as earlier seen on the Vanguard newspaper. Beside the picture, concerns over 2020 budget implementation as oil price drops to $54 per barrel. The story begins on the front page and continues on page 4. The bottom strip story. 100 associations seek registration as political parties. Page 11. And on page 6, 16 states yet to implement new minimum wage. Customs seizes $8 million cash at Lagos Airport. Page 27. Visa on arrival takes effect as federal government launches policy. Page 25. And lastly, fire raises IDP camps in Borno. Page 10. Moving on, New Telegraph newspaper, just above the masthead, 30,000 naira wage. NLC empowers state councils on industrial action. Opposes move to borrow 2 trillion naira from pension funds. The story begins on the front page and continues on page 5. On page 29, we borrowed $17 billion from Exim Bank to fund infrastructure. That's coming from Minister. And just below the masthead on page 7, federal government launches new visa policy, upgrades visa classes. Akeredolu, no going back on Operation Amotekun. Page 10. Stocks. Investors gained 119 billion naira in January. Page 20. Customs intercept $8.065 million at Lagos Airport. That's on page 6. And the leading story, U.S. Nigeria will repay any stolen from $318 million Abacha loot. And the kickers, federal government, America, Island of Jesus sign pact on stolen funds return. Miami, we have record of transparency in usage of recovered assets. The agreement includes mechanisms for monitoring the implementation of these projects as well as external oversight, and it requires Nigeria to repay any funds lost as a result of any new corruption or fraud to the account established to hold the returned assets. Page 4. Around the bottom strip stories, 90% of Boko Haram victims are Muslims. That's coming from President Buhari. Says insurgents want to divide Nigerians on religious line. Presidency cans protest against terrorism, killing in order. Page 5. And on page 7, antibiotics could increase allergy risk. That's all from the New Telegraph newspaper. Up next is the Nigerian Tribune, and I'll start with the leading story. Buhari writes for Christianity Today, says religion can't divide Nigerians. 90% Boko Haram victims are Muslims. Praises Ndimi, his church, for their works in northeastern region. Page 4. Again, the picture is that of Nigeria Visa Policy 2020. Beside that, on page 6, Buhari launches new visa policy to boost economy. U.S. visa ban. Reps to interface with executive diplomatic mission. Page 6. And on page 4, NLC says Amotekun, response to relentless killings, abduction, killings. And on page 30, the story below the picture, Oyo Assembly uncovers duplication, inflation, illegal withdrawal by sacked chairman. And the chairman says allegations unfounded. Page 30. Alright, the picture beside that story, Comptroller General Nigeria Customs Service, Colonel Ahmed Ali, addressing newsmen on the $8.06 million impounded by officers at the Lagos airport on Tuesday. Let's look at the stories just above the leading story. Page 8. Customs impound $8.6 billion at Lagos airport. Akeredolu visits Buhari, invites him to commission or a flyover bridge or the projects. Page 4. And on page 10, how electoral contests rob government of tax revenue. That's coming from the FIRS boss. Alright, above the masthead. Federal government to spend $318 million batch loot on Lagos-Ibadan, Abuja-Kano expressways. The story begins on the front page and continues on page 12. And the last story from the Nigerian Tribune is on page 8. Osun stops fresh registration of Okada. No going back on Okada tricycle ban. That's coming from Sanwo-Olu. Moving on is This Day newspaper. Again, I'll start with the leading story. In landmark agreement, U.S. to return $308 million Abacha assets for infrastructure. Praises Buhari for fight against corruption. And the bottom strip story on page 9, regarding the Integrated Personnel and Payroll Information System. OAGF awaits Finance Minister's approval to withhold tertiary institutions' salaries. And just above the masthead, new visa policy to create globally competitive economy, says President. It continues on page 30, while it begins on the front page. And lastly on page 8, coronavirus not yet a pandemic, says WHO. And the story just below the masthead, don't let terrorists divide us, Buhari urges Nigerians, says no place for those forcing people to change religion, pays tribute to slain CAN chairman Adimi. The story begins on the front page and continues on page 10. Alright viewers, just after this break, we'll be bringing to you the headlines from Business Day and the world of sports. That's in a moment. Please stay on with us.
At the King's Court is a program where we worship and praise the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords through various musical renditions. So join me, Eucharia Ozovehe, at the King's Court every Tuesday by 6 p.m. on this station, and it promises to be exciting and rewarding.
Thank you for staying tuned. Now let's look at the Business Day newspaper, and after that, a sports update. The leading stories on markets: corporates turn to debt market for cash amid liquidity glut. Alright, flour mills: Nigerian breweries set to raise 65 billion naira debt. The story begins on the front page and continues on page 38. Besides that, revenue surge in second half fails to lift Okomu Presco as smuggling continues. The story begins on the front page and continues on page 38. And the inside story is on page 2. It says, inconsistent policies, insecurity, poor infrastructure to limit FDI inflow in 2020. And the picture from left, Hajara Adiola, Chief Executive Officer, Lotus Capital Limited. Tunde Adiola, Executive Director, Commercial Banking, Sterling Bank PLC, and others at the Non-Interest Finance Executive Forum in Lagos. That's all the Business Day newspaper stories. And now, to sports. Let's look at the sports stories on pages 45 and 46 of the Vanguard newspaper. I'll start with the stories on page 45. Alright, Ejide, I'm ready to solve Nigeria's goalkeeping problem. Buhari appoints Amokachi, Nigerian's football ambassador. NPFL, Rangers plot lobbies fall in Makurdi. Amokachi wants Amuneke Olise to coach Eagles. And now to page 46. Alright. Igalo to wear shirt number 25 at Manchester United. To wear boots in tribute to late sister. That's a picture of Igalo and his sister. Liverpool should sell Salah. Replace him with Mbappe or Sancho, says Bent. Coronavirus outbreak. Quarantined Chinese football team forced to train in Usi Hotel corridor. Chelsea give Lampard £150 million transfer kitty. That's a picture of Lampard. Fury, I will take Wilder out. Alright, that's a picture of Tyson Fury. And finally, Abuja 2020. Diary dares athletes to focus on gold. And so viewers, with that sports information, we bring the program to a close today. We thank you for allowing us grace your TV screens. Please let's do this again on Friday when the next edition will be back. Until then, remember, and now there's 3: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of this is love. Thank you.